assessed valuation. You read the paper. Would have probably seen some of these numbers. I didn't have enough room to put much of a history here as far as valuations are concerned, but if you look at this year's valuation, we have a quite a significant increase down at the bottom, almost $80,000 or $80 million more in assessed valuation. That is very significant. I've got another slide here in a little bit that I'll try and point that out. But as you can see there, the valuations have gone up the last couple of years. As a matter of fact, it's kind of been a trend. Like I said, I'll have another slide that will show that. It did go up quite a bit in each county. I think the last couple of years, Pierce County has not gone up as much as what Knox and Antelope did this year. Pierce County went up. We had a total increase in valuation around 18%. I talked to a couple other superintendents, and I think theirs maybe even went up more than that. With the valuations that we have, each penny that we levy amounts to almost $51,700 in tax money. And that, to me, is fairly significant. Levying it a little bit under a penny, of course, reduces that a little bit, but that's what each penny would actually be worth. This is a different slide that I put in this year that I thought was, to me, shows you what the valuation, what's really going on. I took last year's valuation, which is $438 million, and last year's levy, which was just a little over 93 cents. With that last year, we were able to generate a little over $4 million in tax money. This year, well, if you take this year's valuation, use the same levy we used as last year, we could generate $4.8 million. So if you just subtract those, you come up with about $735,000 more in tax money we could generate without changing the levy. You just think about what that does to your budget then. So consequently, we were looking at, of course, lowering the levy with that. But, I think, to me, that's just kind of mind-boggling when you look at that this day and age. I'm going to talk about a little bit here, get off the subject a little bit, get another slide or two here. But, I know you're aware of the committee for the legislature that's meeting on the taxes and restructuring that. And this, I think this is one of the reasons right here that's significant with that you have a lot of your districts out in outstate Nebraska who are becoming, if they're not already, I think it's like 146 non-equalized districts already. And there's going to be more of them. And then you end up with those districts really are not getting any state aid back from the state per se. So the state aid actually is supporting the larger school districts. And that's not really the intent of what the constitutional law says. Again, just some history on the tax levies. In the general fund and the building fund, those are the only two funds that we are currently utilizing. Again, you can kind of see what's happened to that, and if you kind of just think back a little bit with the, probably somewhat with the state aid numbers, and if I had a slide for the valuations, I'm sure you would see some definite correlations between those. But we're going to be looking at just under 80 cents as far as what I'm proposing for a budget this year for tax levies. This is kind of I just threw these in here as something different. It really says the same thing as that previous slide, but I think when you put it on a graph, it really shows you what's happened to the state aid that has jumped around, quite significantly. And you look at that. Property valuations, on the other hand, pretty easy to see what's happened to them. They've been on a fairly much of a steady incline, pretty steep incline this last year. And then the tax levies kind of correspondingly, we got the one little increase in there, but the rest of it has been slowly decreasing, and that kind of goes along with when we become a non-equalized district, for the reason we become a non-equalized district. So as far as this year's budget with the budgeted expenditures, looking a little over $5.6 million. It's about a 3.1% increase. Remember what I talked a little bit about last month. Part of that, and I'm going to be perfectly honest about it, part of that is if we had to increase the budget to allow for the unused budget authority and balance the budget with that. It's not that we're necessarily going to spend that much money. I had to inflate some areas to do that, make it work out that way. Tax generated, again, we were talking about that. Able to lower that, and I have one here on the levies in just a little bit. But we were looking at about $3.9 million in general fund. I levied the same thing as far as the building fund, just I put $200,000 in there. I thought it was an opportunity to build that fund up a little bit. So total tax about $4.1 million. That's up just with a $28 million roughly as far as the taxes. And again, I understand on that, people look at that and I know they're probably grateful that the levy went down, but the other side is that you're still looking at the same amount of taxes. It's just that or more taxes, but and you've got to have that to support the budget. Estimated revenues, and again, these are just estimates that we go by each year. Again, you somewhat use them to balance the budget, but we carried over about $2.1 million this year. The other things, you have local property, those that include your, or a lot of that comes from your lost my train of thought. I was going to say the county. We've got county license. That'd be your card. What do I want to say? Call it card tax. Yeah. Then our property tax. County, we get licenses and fees. The state, that includes our state aid. A few other things would go into that. Federal is mostly your grants. Title I grant. Or Title I grant will be around 70, a little over 70,000 again this year. And then just our REAP grant. Actually, we got our notification on our REAP grant today. That was just under $17,000. Non-revenue is really nothing really there that we know will come in. Sometimes we get some money that comes in from, say it's a donation or you sell something or whatever, we go into that. So we're looking at about $6.9 million as far as revenues. And as far as the budgeting process, you got to balance that with expenditures. Your non-special education, of course, most of this, around 80% of that would be for staffing issues, salaries, benefits, that type of thing. And again, not going to lie to anybody, I inflated some areas in that. I actually allowed the budget for about hiring one extra teacher if we would have to. Special education, I kept that fairly close to what we did last year. I didn't really want to cut anything out of that, even though we saved a little bit of money this year on staffing changes with that. We're looking at possibility of sending at least one other student to ELC, the Learning Center in Norfolk, at least 3 days a week. Anytime you send a student there, that's about $45,000 a year. It's 5 days a week, so plus you've got transportation if you had to do anything extra with that. So I like to leave plenty of money into the special education. Cash reserves, that's really been running about the same as what we have been with that. I actually took some money, just flip-flopped with that with $92,000 that we talked about as far as the unused budget authority. So that brings you with a total of $6.9 million again as far as the estimated expenditures. And the estimated revenues, estimated expenditures are the numbers you have to balance. The other major funds that we have utilizing the budget depreciation fund, I did put allow for some transfers of more money into that in the budget. Again, that's more of a matter of bill you're having that using up that unused budget authority, have some place to put it. But that's something if we needed The others are fairly close. The other funds are fairly close to what they were. I think not too big of a difference in most of them. The employee benefit one we increased a little bit, but that's basically money that comes in and out to go for the teacher retirement, the teachers that are retired, and make sure that we have money to pay for that. School lunch program, allowed for a little bit more money in that. And in the special building fund, with what I've levied, the $200,000 in there, that. Then the student fee fund, that one changed a little bit last year with the driver's ed, with Mr. Tassmeyer still teaching the driver's ed, but a lot of that money now goes directly to him rather than funneling through the school. So that one's we were able to change that one a little bit. So, and other than that, or I should say, that's a pretty quick. I guess going through it. If you ask questions from the board members, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them.
Just clarity. I think you said under property tax, 28,000. Yeah, you said 28 million.
Oh, it's 28,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just
so you had it recorded.
I didn't want to say it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's 28,000.
Yeah, I believe you said 28 million.
Yeah. No, we didn't. We're not taxing.
That's really good job.
Yeah, that would have brought a few more chairs being filled here.
The other question is, if we go down, I thought there used to be a concern about going below the 0.9 on the levy. Is that we're not equalized, or what's the?
When we become non-equalized, that doesn't become a factor. If you're equalized and drop below, you have 10 cents from where the levy is set. So if it was $1, you got to be at least 90 cents. If it was $1.02, you'd have to be at 92.
Okay.
But if you're equalized, you have to be within that range, or there is a penalty. And that first year we were looking at hovering around that, we looked at, and it would have cost us at that time around, I want to say $16,000, if I remember correct at that time. But when we're not equalized, it doesn't really make any difference.
Okay.
Are we allowing enough in our building fund for, you talked about, kicked around, what we're gonna do with the junior high and all that stuff. Is there enough in that fund to do something with that?
I think as far as, we've got a start in there, this will cover, if we're gonna do roofs, which we plan on maybe doing a roof, is gonna probably be, around another 50,000, 60,000. But yeah, I think it's a good start. If I think if the discussion gets to that point, Krista, where you're gonna do something with the junior high, then I think you start putting more money into that. And you can build that fairly quickly. You get dollars fairly quickly, which would be a good start. I'm not saying it'd pay for a building.
But unless you have plans for it, it's kind of, it used to be a money reserved for the district, but now with interest rates so low, it's really money to just sit there.
There are some school districts, like the one I used to be at, that trying to use a building fund and another fund in here that we don't use to build a building. And Ms. Novicki can probably attest to the fact that that's kind of a mess right now. That's some litigation coming up.
It's already in the building, what is the point? I don't get it.
Got utilizing the building and don't even know if it's legal yet, so. Any other questions? Mike, you can't ask any questions.
I apologize.
Okay, no other questions from the board, then we'll take any questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions? I'm shocked.
Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, I guess, echoing the things Krista was saying. I'm a fiscal conservative just as much as anybody else, but I think we've got, as a taxpayer, I guess, I don't pay any share compared to any of the other guys in the room necessarily, but again, I would really like to see something that says, when was the last time we actually built on maybe the elementary school in the 90s? Something like that. now is the time. I mean, as much as it actually pains me to say it, now is the time of plenty that we should be raising those things and keeping them padded so that we have the money to do that if we want to. It's easy to bond something for 30 years, sure, but if you can raise cash in a year or two and pay for it, then you're done and you don't have to bond it at all forever, and you don't pay any interest, and it's no problem. I guess I would really like to see something that would deal with the junior high or would upgrade a gym, or there are a lot of schools adding on and making their facilities really nice, and ours is really nice to start with. But I come to the meetings the other 11 months out of the year and everything's always real tight. Well, when you drop your levy 20 cents, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I get that, because it'd be a little knife in the back to keep it at 90 cents when we're when the valuation's so high. But we have what, $2 million in CDs and savings, and really no plans for anything in the future. And I'd kind of like to see, since my kids are in the future phase, I'd like to see more plaques on the walls that say this gym was built and dedicated and whatever it was with all those names on it, and get some of those things done in the time that we have the cash to be able to do it. Does it stink for the people that have to pay a whole bunch in their taxes? Sure. But they also own things of great value at the moment, and that's the way the game is played. I pay proportionally the same amount of taxes, and mine went up 60% in the last 5 years. So I feel it just as much as anybody, I guess, but I'm kind of discouraged that there's no plan, I guess. And I would like to encourage the board members to make a plan. When you have the ability to raise $50,000 with 1 cent, instead of 75, go 80 and dump it all in the building fund, and now we got $1 million, and when we want to tear down the junior high, we don't have to ask anybody. Just do it. Because you pay cash for everything. That's a fiscally conservative way of doing it, rather than bonding it and paying interest for 30 years on something. I don't think and I say this at all the tax meetings I go to, I don't think anybody complains about paying taxes when they see a benefit of those taxes being spent. Everybody has a hard time paying taxes when nothing's happening. And I'm not saying nothing is happening. We're obviously providing a lot of jobs and doing a lot of things in the school, but the side that I come from is I would like to see just add a cent and put it in the kid fund so we don't have to do so many fundraisers every year. I mean, I'm surprised already this year I haven't really got too many t-shirt requests so my daughter can go on field trips and things. I mean, pay for the stuff. People pay their taxes, have their kids do things out of that fund. It's kind of infuriating because you can't say no to a kid. My daughter's going to bring home her jump rope for heart stuff here in a few months, or I would assume, and it's hard to say no to an 8-year-old begging for money. But it gets a little tiresome, especially as a business owner. I mean, it's too bad nobody else bothered to come, but you know, I budget in the news office budget between $500 and $1,000 a year of just money to hand over to the school, because I know it's coming, because I want to support all the programs, and I want to support all the kids stuff, and I want to buy all the t-shirts and do all the booster stuff.
Like right now.
It would be easier if I just would, because I wouldn't get harassed all year.
And then I'll just start subtracting it.
I give you $1,050 at a time, or $500 all at once. How about that? And then don't come down anymore.
We'll just
Just don't come bother me anymore. I mean, it's too bad, because you create this system for the kids of you have to fundraise to do the things. I mean, you can join for free, and some of them are part of the school program, but then you can't go do the things that the kids want to do unless they bust their butt making money for stuff. So, I don't know. With the levy that we've got and the valuation that we've got, yeah, it might come down, but it's only going to come down when people stop paying that price for land. And that's a very gradual thing unless it crashes. So we're so far away from the maximum. Another nickel would raise an enormous amount of money and benefit for the school. The other idea that I had was that we constantly cart these kids to Norfolk or the surrounding area. Would it be possible to create, like Northeast Community College is doing in O'Neill? Can we make Plainview a hub facility so we could take all those money and kids and educate them here? We would hire the people that we ship our kids down to Norfolk to deal with, and make kind of a satellite specialty school here in Plainview somewhere. Instead of paying $45,000 plus $1,200 a month in mileage per kid or whatever it is to get them down there. Would that be a possibility of something we could add on or do? The hospital does it all the time. It's too expensive to make the truck come in every week, so we build our own facility and we have our own radiology equipment now. And then other schools could use us as well. So
That's actually one of the things, Brooke, that Mr. Jansen and I have talked about, maybe
Sure.
down the road of doing.
oh, cost sharing,
Because
that would
we're
be a
both-
huge benefit, yeah.
We're both looking at the same situation with that.
Yeah.
And it would be very feasible.
It's just
Having-
something that
Both
maybe
of
would
us
work.
probably have facilities right now where we have a room someplace could be used for. The biggest problem would be hiring
Right.
staff members, but that is a possibility.
I just think it's unfortunate that Mr. Alt does an enormous amount of planning, and he asks the other administrators and the activity director what they need and what they see and for an increase in the budget. But if the board members would say, add 3 cents and we pay for all the whatever activity stuff, buy new plywood. You didn't hear me. All sorts of things. It seems a little over, especially like for me. I run an office supplies business. I understand that I don't do the volume that gets the price that the school can get from the ESU unit. So I'm paying taxes to the ESU unit, I'm paying taxes to the school, and that money's not returned necessarily to the community. I'm paying taxes so that the ESU unit can subsidize items that the school then buys from them. It's just kind of frustrating to deal with it that way.
Run that by me again.
The ESU unit sells you stuff, office supplies, things, markers, dry erase boards, things like that. Those things could be had locally, possibly, if the market was there. I'm not going to order $10,000 worth of stuff in the hopes that the school buys it. I'm not picking on you, I'm just saying. Then you pay taxes to the ESU unit so they can buy things in huge quantity and subsidize it so that it comes back to the school at a cheap price. Then you pay taxes to the school so you can buy those subsidized items that were bought using tax dollars. Do you see where that gets frustrating a little bit for a business owner?
Welcome to the farm life.
I know, but it doesn't stop unless you stop it. We scraped for 20 years with Mr. Betterman to get that $2 million, and it really hasn't grown in a time that it really could have grown for a specific project or something. So I would just like to encourage you to do that.
Anyone else have any comments?
I would have to agree. We know that something needs to be done with this junior high building. When I walked by the other day and there's a class being held out here in the hallway, it's just not working.
Oh, there's 2 classes in here, one's teaching math and one's teaching English. It's not a good situation.
So I don't know if it's the wiring we have to do up there to make that up to code, which would, who knows what you can get into when you start that mess.
If you're going to put air conditioning in, then you'd have to do a lot with the wiring, yes.
Or build, tear it down.
This is what I get sitting out here is whatever it was for the band room air conditioning thing, $16,000 is a figure that it's not really possible or feasible to come up with that money or reasonable. But 1 cent on an already 30-cent lower than it's ever been levy would pay for 3 or 4 of those. It's kind of frustrating to sit here as a community member and watch the school suffer when we have the ability to.
But it doesn't stop there,
No.
because then you got the wiring issue, which
We
is
do.
going to cost us megabucks
But it probably should be done anyway.
in every
If you're growing your facility and keeping it all updated.
in every aspect.
I think we'd be better off tearing it down, putting in a couple portables or whatever before you go into remodeling that.
Well, I think one thing through this feasibility study, you may get some information on that
Right.
about maybe what is practical for some of your facilities.
Sure.
You got that junior high building sitting there, well,
Yeah.
how practical is that in the long run, that type of thing. I think some of that information may come out of that.
Sure. Be good.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll adjourn this meeting. Okay, we'll go into the call meeting to order for the 2013-14 tax request. Roll call. Bob. Mike.
Present.
Marilyn, Don, Alden.
Here.
Vicky.
Here.
Myself here. Need a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Roll call. Myself, yes. Vicky?
Yes.
Alden?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Okay, I didn't prepare anything in addition. I've already shown it there. As far as the tax request, what I put together that was published in the paper was based on the budget that, with the numbers I just went through. With that, with the valuation and everything, we would be looking at a property tax valuation of $3,902,279, and the building fund property tax of $202,020, basically. Feel that's what it would take to support that budget that I presented. I don't know what other questions you may have on that, things that affected. You know, changed, and we decided to put more money in the building fund, and we have to take a look at that and look at our maximum money we can put. Because we can't, based on levy limits, we can't budget to spend whatever we want to spend. There are limits on that point that really affect us more than the actual levy right now. We levied $1. We can't levy $1.
What's our limit of the increase?
We were looking at the $92,000 the board approved last time, and I think there was like another $20,000 roughly on top of that we could increase.
No percent.
Not right offhand.
I mean,
They
it's
allow
like
you,
2.5
your unused budget authority is 2%. Basically, they look at 2% of your previous year's budgeted expenditures. That's what they do, I believe.
They don't
I'm
have
not familiar with it. Used to be with a certain amount, and then if the board approved it, you could go another 1%.
They don't give you that option, right?
They don't give you that option
No,
anymore.
not now. Someday that may come back. That's the other thing. And Alden maybe knows more about this, and I'm gonna hand out a thing here during the regular board meeting on this tax committee that's meeting. I'm not gonna be surprised if there's some fairly major changes in what they do with the tax structure. And while I think it's probably necessary, it's also scary, what might happen. Because we could be looking, we're in great shape as far as things, as far as the school district and having money to work with. But, if they turn around and they decide we're going to not tax land the way they're taxing, that's gonna hit us pretty hard. So what are we gonna be looking at then? And I don't know how the income tax and that, how it's all gonna fit together. I don't think anybody does at this time, but there could be some major changes in that in the next couple of years.
Yeah, the math would be simple as far as, I think the valuation, or it's 70% right now. Well, if they move that to 60%, we lose 10% of our district's valuation that can be taxed. So your levy next year could have to go back up 10 to match what we're gonna lose. And, the property valuation won't change, it's just that they're not gonna allow it to be taxed at that percentage.
So should we lower our levy that much this year then?
Well, fact that you still have to be responsible.
Well, I know, I'm not talking 10%, but do you want to do, I don't know what I don't remember the figure he proposed, but, it might be a little easier for people to grasp onto it,
But you're still just drawing, you're just guessing. I know it's a frustration. It's like the healthcare deal. If they don't change anything and you do it and you raise another $300,000 or $400,000 and you set it in the bank and it just sits there.
You gotta have a plan before you decide.
Yes,
yes. That's-
you've
What
got
you're
to.
gonna do before you decide to
That's-
raise that money.
We already went through that just changing period deals. There's no way we can throw out that, we're gonna build a building here, you've gotta have that all laid out, and we've gotta have the meetings and say, you know, we can take this levy to here, this is what it's gonna cost.
I always think that it's good to have a reserve, but people don't wanna spend extra tax money just so there's more money sitting in a reserve.
No.
No, that's, I'm not saying I wanna set a reserve, but I've been wanting this board to make some kind of plan for how long, and it's like,
I
the only
agree,
plan
it's better,
the only plan I ever hear is, let's talk to Creighton, well, okay, fine, we got that done, now let's get on, move on here, and do,
I agree.
like you said, do something with our home building here, so.
When you, Mr. Alt, when you said you can only increase unused budget authority, that's money left over that you didn't have budgeted for anything?
No, you can only increase.
Explain that for me.
You've got a limit of how much you can increase it, Brooke. That's your unused budget authority. You know, like if you, according to
But
the
how did-
state, you could spend $3 million and you budget for $2,800,000, you've got $200,000 of unused budget.
Right, right. What is our, I mean, the maximum levy is like $1.05 or something, right? So if we have, so it's not, but if it's budgeted, it's not unused.
But we can't budget, I mean, we can't go up to that levy because the state would never approve it because we would have to budget to spend more money than
Right.
that maximum amount is we can spend.
Right,
If we
but
get
saying
caught up
that,
against
saying that we can't raise it is not, you can as long as you have it in the budget that you're going to spend that on a project at some point.
I can't even budget that
No.
to spend it.
How can you not budget it? Everybody else does that. The city doesn't budget,
They put a
You only
limit
have a-
on what you
a
can
limit
budget,
each
how
year
much you
that
can
you-
increase your budget.
increase your budget.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean,
But that's
That's
the
what you're
total
gonna
dollars,
spend.
Total dollars. So we went down to
but you don't
0.79.
raise exactly what you spend every year. See what I'm saying? Like, take for instance the county. The county always makes a big show about how much they lower the levy, but it's because they're not even close to the levy limit. But it's because their valuation went up so far that they were able to drop that. That's the same situation here. I've never heard any other taxing agency say there's a maximum, other than the maximum mill levy.
If,
No, there's a maximum dollar amount.
yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
There
$1.05.
always is. There always is.
No.
No, that we can spend.
no.
You
There-
can't.
there's-
We're gonna
You
give
can't
you
set
$2
your
million,
mill levy.
but
Your
you're
mill
gonna
levy
only
is set
spend
by
$1.5
what your
million
budget is.
of that.
You
Right.
can't just say, well, let's raise our mill levy.
But that's what I'm
5 cents,
saying.
because you
It's
can't
not
do
that you can't, it's that you need to put it in the budget to spend it. If you budget a building renovation,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you put it in the budget to spend it or not. You have a 2% limitation each year, and that's all you can raise.
Yep.
above and
The only
beyond
way-
last year's
Right.
budget.
The only way you can raise it if you have a special election, correct?
Yeah.
Above and beyond last year's budget.
Right.
So our budget
So we
only
could-
went up
there's no way that
2%
we
this
could
year.
Keep it a tax rate at 0.93. There's no way that we could possibly do that because we can't spend that much money.
Well, you can
Is
spend
that
it.
correct?
Yeah, because we'd have generated
Can spend it.
$785,000.
The only way we can do
can't
is spend a
that
special
much.
They won't allow you to do it. Even though you can do a project, they're gonna make you borrow the money or do whatever. You're not
Yep.
just gonna be able
Is
to.
that a school-specific thing? Because I've never heard
It's
any
been
other
on the
tax
communication
agency
on
do
for
that.
years.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? I'll adjourn this tax request meeting and go on into the regular board meeting. Once again, we'll do a roll call. Bob, Mike, Alden,
Here.
Vicki here, myself here, Marilyn is still on. Constant agenda. Any changes on the agenda? Okay, any changes on the minutes that anyone saw?
Let's see, you need a motion to approve that consent agenda first, or we're doing the minutes? That minutes go with it? I forget now.
Yeah, the constant agenda goes with.
With the
all of
minutes,
it.
okay.
Hearing none. Financial reports, Mr. All, did you have something?
I don't think there was anything out of the ordinary on that.
Okay, and then we'll go to claims.
So I always had a question.
Oh,
That's, no, he's on the plane.
That's on top.
yeah. So any questions on the claims?
Mileage and
Took that
bus lady
That's
that
that
gets to school.
person will be paid it.
So we end up buying an air conditioning unit for that.
Bought a small air conditioner for $500, true value if we were trying it. I think it's, took the edge off, I think is the word Mrs.
It's
Hahn
still,
used.
it's still hot, but it's not, I'm not dripping in sweat after junior high band. I'm just glowing.
But that other one didn't work.
It didn't work. It ended up raising the humidity. It was, and I don't know if that's fair to the company. The day we tried it was not one of the best days to try it. It was hot and humid.
It did get worse though.
But yeah, it was
better
not,
outside.
it was not comfortable in there, so just decided it wasn't worth going with it.
I see we went to Menards and bought fans. You can't buy fans anywhere in town.
They didn't have, I went downtown.
Really, I called down there today and they have them. So they can order them within 2 days. So, I mean, from what I figured, we saved $48. Now, I think at some point, as a board, we need to decide, is $48 significant enough for our patrons to save, you know, for our taxpayers, or do we need the $48 in our community?
I don't even think that was the issue, it was that they were dying over there.
Okay,
The need
well,
Yeah.
right now.
well,
'Cause I did
I'm
go
just
down
saying
fast.
it happens more often than not. I'm not just picking on you, but it's here again, so, but.
What window did we have damaged that was repaired?
What was that?
Window?
We had a window in the science room over here, and then I think it was in Mr. Janot's room, there was another small window. I don't know
Lock
the
or
one.
something.
This one, I think, has been out since long before I
That's the
came.
reason that's not there, though. Because that's the way you can draw air.
Air through.
So if you replace, you don't need to replace that. You don't wanna replace it.
Oh, too
You
late.
gotta re- That's there on purpose.
That's the reason for that?
That's there, so
Well,
that you can
somebody
draw air.
kicked it out of
Otherwise,
there.
there's no place to draw
Yeah.
air.
Yeah, we had a deal like that at Scribner Snyder too, now you mention that. You know, we took a stone from the mower sometime, I think, went from Mr. Janot.
But you need to put a hood in there anyway, so sometime we need to put a hood in there. But that's why that wasn't there. They took it out.
The wire in there doesn't,
Right.
it was kind of jagged.
Well,
It needed
it
to
was
go.
kind of a makeshift
Yeah.
deal, but
Okay.
at least they couldn't crawl through it. Was the idea.
So we need to make a vent then for air flow?
Yeah.
So do we need to make a note of that?
Take a look.
There you go.
Thought you
Because
fixed something,
otherwise,
didn't you?
you're pulling, you make a vacuum in it, you're not getting any air.
Yeah, well, just so we get it fixed, accomplished, done.
Is that for the air conditioning or what?
No, they put two vents in the top of the
Oh,
ceiling
exhaust
a long time
vents.
ago.
No.
And the gas company, I think, did it for us.
I see.
They had it outside, but
Yeah,
when
let
you
air
turn it
in.
on, it wasn't getting any air, so they had to take that panel out, so air, sucked air.
It's kind of like the home ec room, it ventilates into the roof. When she turns on her ventilation system, it goes into the roof, so everything, or into the ceiling. So everything she cooks comes right down to the office.
Well, we planned that thing.
It's all right, it's good, huh?
Yeah.
Some
That's
days.
what I was cooking.
Any other questions on the claims? Hearing none, then I will need a motion on the consent agenda, please.
Also moved.
Been moved and seconded, roll call, Vicky.
Yes.
Alden.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Next item, is any public comments, if anybody has any at this time? If not, we'll go into discussion items. Review board policy 402.8, employee travel compensation.
Again, the review policies were in a separate enclosure in your packet. The first one of those, the employee travel compensation, only one little change in that. There was a typing error on the original policy. I changed that. It's in number 3. It was by the superintendent. I forget what it was before that. The others, I didn't have, I I think policies were okay on the recognition for service for employees and others. And on the credit cards, we don't use credit cards a lot. I think Mrs. Novicki has one, I have one, Bob Cade has one, I believe. And we have teachers that come in, if they need one and they ask. The other day, somebody came in, I guess it was Miss Brower come in and use mine to pay for people going to choral honor choir type thing. So most of that we let them use a credit card that way. So we don't have a lot of them floating around. So I think that policy is probably okay. The communication with employees, I didn't see anything with that. The last one, I was looking at this again today, and as I looked at that, it doesn't really say what we're doing. So I typed up another one, and we won't talk about this, but you might want to come back next month and change it a little bit. This policy talks about the income protection plan. It says the district contributes the cost of a board-approved income protection plan for all employees who qualify, and then it lists the employees. I think, and James, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think this was changed when Mr. Ham was here. And the reason for that, the income protection plan, the way that's set up, if the district pays that premium and something happens and an employee has to collect on it, then they have to pay taxes on that money they collect. Now, if the employee pays that on their own, then if they collect on it, then they don't have to pay taxes on it. So I think Mr. Ham made that change, wanted to make that change so the employee would be, paying that. And what usually happens is, you give the employee the money and then you deduct it back out of their paycheck is what usually happens with that. So this really isn't the correct wording with that. So what I propose there, and if you just look at that, and it's a very simple policy, it's just that all employees must purchase their own disability insurance through a provider selected by the district, and then payments for disability insurance will be made through the monthly payroll deductions. And that still leaves it up to us. And what we've done also with that is through negotiations, the board has contributed $275 for certificated staff members to go into that flex account, and $150 for the classified staff. Or if it's say a part-time, half-time employee, they would get a pro rata or like 50% of that amount to go in, which actually goes to help. You would have the ability to go into that and help cover that if you would have expenses.
Is that stated in the contract now?
The flex thing is put in the negotiated agreement.
But that 275 is
In the negotiated agreement it is.
Is it in there?
Yeah, but I don't think our policy has to say that. It's just that the board would put money in there, then the negotiated agreement would say how much. So then you can change that without changing the policy itself. So, like I said, I think we can bring this back, or if you think about it a little bit, if you want to change it some, we can do that next month. We can probably bring it back next month to relook at it.
So do you need to put all these people on there that are covered then? On
They,
this new one?
I think the policy, what we've been doing, and this is maybe, through the negotiated agreement with the certified staff, and then also what we've done with the classified staff. I think it is written up, the certified staff, it's all certified staff, and then it would be like I mentioned, if you have a half-time employee, they would get half. When you get to classified, it's a different amount, but also for classified, it has to be a 10-month or longer employee would receive that. So if you only work 9 months, you wouldn't participate in that. That's what is currently being done. Get that out right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the disability company is part of that too. I mean, if you're just part-time, they don't cover you.
It's a little bit confusing though,
No, go ahead, no.
It used to be in a negotiated agreement that the school board would pay all the disability insurance.
That was changed when Mr. Ham was here.
But we still do. It's
Just
just
still be doing
it's
that's a dollar amount.
process.
Anytime you get rid of dollar amounts, you say they're gonna.
Well, but now I think negotiated agreement for the teachers does say $275. That's what is in there.
You would, I
Are
think,
you gonna get something in here for the non-certified staff? Cause they're not, I mean, they do get paid for that, don't they, $150?
How much what?
Did you say they get $150?
$150 is what we've been contributing for that.
I think it would be better if that was not in the negotiated agreement, that it was simply that the base salary was raised enough to cover
Yeah, I
it.
know.
That would be so much cleaner.
Because that's when I was on negotiation, we always tried to get things into some kind of a percent or something, so that you didn't have to go back every year and renegotiate the thing. Maybe do the same type of thing for.
The school I was at before, it was, I think it used to be as a negotiated agreement is a decimal amount, like .0055 of your salary or
Sure.
something is what it was.
Sure.
And then that would automatically increase a little bit.
That's something we can get in negotiations, we can get that done.
Mr. Green, you said when you were on negotiations, you were trying to get it so that it was.
It is
Percentage?
275 right now, is what they
But you were
say.
trying to get it to be a percentage?
Yeah,
Okay.
or something that would relate to whatever the cost is, I suppose, I don't know. They can work that out. That would be something that you'd wanna make a note on.
I guess, kind of skipped through all these, but I want to ask a question on recognition for service employees. It says, staff members who have been employed by the district for 20 years shall receive an appropriate gift that recognizes 20 years of service. Don't we give them?
They get a gift certificate.
Okay, then what is it for, when do they get the extra day?
That is if they, over 20 years, and say someone is in 5-year increments, say 25, 30, 35, yeah.
Okay, should we have that in there? Does it need to be? Otherwise, we don't have to give, I mean, it's like, according to the board policy, I don't know.
Where do they get an extra day's pay for what?
Extra personal day.
Extra personal.
Maybe it doesn't need to be in there, but I just noticed it.
Well, it should probably be in there.
If it's a
If you're gonna do
policy,
it,
it should
if
be.
you're gonna do it.
Yeah. I mean, we have them in here, I mean, we have the plaques, the certificates, the gift, and then the retirement, but we don't have in there for in between. I just think if we're doing it, we may as well make it a policy.
So you're looking at Chris to put something in between like 3 and 4,
Well, like
and it would be.
Whatever that is now that Imogene said we do it 20 in increments of 5 years, giving them an extra
Staff members
over 20.
with 20 years of service and multiples of 5 thereafter will receive 1 extra day.
Well, 20 doesn't because they get a gift, but it'd be
25.
25
Over 20 years.
And multiples of 5 get an extra.
paid personal days that they get.
Additional paid personal day. So that'd be on the 25th, 30th, 35th, is that right? Not every year, but on
No,
those 5
every
years.
5 years.
Okay, right.
What?
That way our policies are jive what we're doing,
Sit
I
down and
guess.
say what we're
Then I
doing.
went to
Yeah. Okay.
Vegas one
I just wanted Imogene to give me some literature.
Guys, just like change these, what a pain.
Okay, that's the only other question I had. Anyone else? Okay.
So that one will be brought back to the October meeting,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
All action items then. Your motion to adopt the 2013-14 school budget.
I'll move we approve the 2013-14 budget as presented.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the 2013-14 budget. Roll call, Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Alden,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
myself, yes, Marilyn. Person's absent. Okay.
Make a motion to approve the tax request for 2013-14 school year.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the tax increase request. Roll call, myself, yes, Vicky,
Yes.
Alden,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Bob. Next item is approve on first and second reading changes to board policy 402.05 R1, employee grievance procedure.
Okay, after I made the comment at last month's meeting that it was close to the same wording, and that is this negotiated agreement was a lot closer than what I thought it was. Actually, it was in the first part there in the definition of terms. I think originally there were, or in the negotiated agreement, or in the prior policy, there were like 3 items there they combined. I think it was in the grievant. They had that into 2 different things. The negotiated agreement put it into one, so that's really the only difference there was in it. So I think we can do this on first and second reading and have that cleaned up that way then.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve board policy 40205 R1, employee grievance policy.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, Vicky.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Alden.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Myself, yes. And I guess we're going to discuss and act on revision to class ranking system. That must be.
This is going to make us thoroughly confused on this, so we kind of went round
We
and
had 7
round.
people in the office that were thoroughly confused over this whole thing.
Trying to understand how it was to be computed to start with, so take it
Okay.
away, Mrs. Cleary.
All right. The way I'm reading this is that our students will have 2 separate GPAs because this is just a ranking system, correct? Okay, so, knowing what I know from doing this job for, as well, not just the principal job, just being in education, you better have proof on paper that this is correct, or you are going to have parents down your throat. So, concern number 1 is that Bob and I are at graduation and we take out our transcripts. His GPA is higher than mine, but I'm the valedictorian of the class. That's not gonna make parents angry? For any of you that had kids go through here, would you not be angry over that? Second of all, we have to put this in Power School to make this come out right. Otherwise, it's a spreadsheet, it's gonna be on somebody's computer, which could get lost, could not get lost. Remember, I had a computer crash, lost a lot of things. So the way I'm interpreting, this is a class rank, and we're doing this to determine basically the top 4 spots.
Because we've had many problems, issues in the past.
Okay, understand that, but they can't have 2 GPAs. You can't send a transcript to a college with 2 different rankings and 2 different transcripts. We've plugged in everything we could possibly think of to figure this out. The other issue is, it has to go into Power School. There is going to have to be something in Power School that shows the history of this. And we can call it a ranking system, we can call it whatever we want. It's a matter of semantics at this point, but I don't think 2 GPAs are probably a good idea.
Why call it a GPA? Well,
I thought this was simply for valedictorian.
It is, but
But then you don't
But
have
you
a
give
class,
us-
you don't use this to send out class ranking
to college.
you just use.
but it's gonna have to
school.
show up somewhere.
Samantha.
If you send your valedictorian and salutatorian to the same college, and your valedictorian has lower GPA, because it will be lower if that's what it is, that college will catch that. And they're gonna show that they were that rank. Now, the odds of that, I don't know how good that is, but, I mean, that's possible.
Well, there,
It'll
I
look
mean,
bad
there were
for
like
Plainview.
5 to 7 people sitting in there trying to figure this out. Also, we've already added writing, but then we found out language usage was not in there, which is also a test given. The other issue is that MAPS testing was never intended to be used for this purpose. It is not the same test. You and I would not take the same test.
But you don't take the same classes either. You know,
Well, I
kids that
understand
take
that, and
tougher
that's
classes
a
should be
choice.
rewarded for that.
But
I
on
think.
that, you should get a student who answers more correct questions should have a higher score, correct?
Maybe, maybe not.
Should.
Should have, but maybe, maybe not.
The scoring is different between the two tests.
So, I mean, I will do whatever you want me to do, but we went through this and, I mean, 2 GPAs or a ranking number, I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but when it boils down to that graduation and all of these kids are taking their transcripts out and looking at them, and then they get back to comparing them, they're gonna come back not very happy because my GPA was higher, and I'll be honest, the valedictorian, salutatorian, who the top 5 are, I couldn't tell you who they were when I went to school here and taught here. I mean, those things to the kids are important, to the parents are important, but in the scheme of life, it's not that big a deal. There are no scholarships because you're the valedictorian of the class. You get scholarships because you score high on the ACT, and you get scholarships because you're in the top 10, top 25% of your class.
Didn't we approve this a year ago?
2 years ago before I got here. But the other thing is that this won't even be determined until their senior year starting in November. This could technically drop somebody 4 points if you looked at all of the data. So you're sitting here first in your class, you could end up 9th before, within a matter of 1 month.
Well, I'm confused. Why, I mean, how come this is now an issue after 2 years? I mean, didn't anybody bother looking at it before now? I mean,
Because we just got the numbers back to do anything with it.
Did you just start with the freshmen when it started? So that
This
those
says
kids are-
actually 2015 freshmen, but I don't think that's correct. It should be the freshman class of 2016, by the way. Because this was adopted before I came, and you don't ever implement something,
I thought it was this year's freshman class.
should have been last
Last
year's
year's
freshman class. And so we're trying to plug in numbers. Everything is embargoed until, like the juniors, we're just now getting their results. And you can't do anything with these numbers, so basically you sit here idly for 4 years before you can do anything. I kind of snooped around and if you say tonight this is what we're doing, then this is what we're doing, but we do have to add that writing in there and we do have to add language usage. However, there are some schools that do, and I know you get into the whole issue with core versus non-core. However, we did find one school that kind of got away from that a little bit. They get 12 credit hours for just the core classes and 5 credit hours for the non-core classes.
See, I
Not
don't like that.
required.
It's, you're
But
putting
this is
emphasis
core.
on it. You're taking emphasis away from, if some kid doesn't want to excel or isn't a math wizard but is great in art and goes on and becomes a graphic designer or whatever, those classes are just as important to that kid as, saying that your core classes, your math and English are more important than something like that some other kid might excel in, then we are not doing justice to all of our students.
But you already did that by putting this as 15% of their GPA, which is a huge amount. This is all core. This isn't any non-core. If you look at this, this is only core classes. So you've already put 15% of the emphasis on core classes anyway. There's no art or band or FFA or whatever it is. This is core right here.
But they go into the 85% of the GPA that goes in there.
Well, it will here too. I mean, if they're still getting, and we're talking anything that is not required, because you can get into the argument where government is a required core class. So should they get weighted more? I always said no when I was a teacher because that was a required class. Physics was not. But this is all the core classes, and we're already doing that by having the NISA and the MAPS as 15% of their grade. And I'll be the first to say that we've had a lot of kids that have survived and made it through high school because of FFA or ag or band or shop or any of those things. I'm not taking anything away from those people. I think what they do is important. But we already made that emphasis by saying 15% of their grade is based on NISA tests and MAPS tests.
Well, we just
Those are
want
only
them to
core.
take some ownership, like it says in their assessment scores.
Well, but if they have to take, I mean, figure it out, if they only take non-core things, they're only getting, you know, part 10 credits as opposed to the 12, and all of that goes into their GPA.
Well, it comes out sometimes that it's not, you're not penalizing people that are taking non-core classes. It's an advantage for them because they're not taking physics and they're not taking advanced biology, which are the hard courses. And if they get a B in those and they get an A in all their non-core classes, then the person that's taking the tough schedule is the one that gets penalized, not the one that's taking the non-core.
You know, I talked to Jerry.
Is that not true?
That is true.
If they
I
don't
talked to
score high
Jerry
enough, if they don't score.
also, and, you know, the big argument was, well, we have all these option B people that are valedictorian and salutatorian. He's been here for 15 years, we went back. Not one student that was option A or option B has ever been valedictorian or salutatorian, ever.
I don't think that's been the issue. I think the issue is option B have been maybe number 3. And the number 3 kid didn't like that option B kid being ahead of him. I'm saying.
I don't know. I mean, we could go back and find that number, but this is, I think, when you delve into what all of this actually does, I think it's much more intense than it was intended to be, maybe. Does that make sense?
We just want to reward those kids who went above and
Exactly,
beyond.
and that's why we thought, okay, what about giving more credits for all core subjects? Because we're already basing it on core subjects anyway. Because this, again, we're making the core teachers accountable for this part of this again, which, you know, they're in the paper for testing, they're in the paper for everything because that's what the state assesses.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Something you're not saying, and maybe you're gonna get to it, I'm not sure, but I sat in here for an entire in-service, just a few teachers 2 years ago, and was MAPS trained on how to read MAPS scores, and Lori led that, Lori Clues did, and it was making sure we never rank the kids off of these scores. That was the main focus. They did everything in their power to make sure that you could not go up and say, well, this kid got this kid got that, so they're better. The MAP scores were geared to do individual assessment, not against each other. So I think putting it into their GPA is exactly the opposite of what MAPS was meant to do.
Unless they showed improvement. I can't, was you guys on the committee? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, us and several teachers.
Okay.
All thought this was great.
Well,
Take back to
and
the
I
committee
don't-
as far as
you
I'm
know,
concerned.
and I've
I
done
don't
some
know.
snooping, and I don't know that was, I just think they went along with it maybe because they didn't wanna tell anybody no. I don't know.
See, that's stupid.
I agree.
It
Then,
is.
then I guess we go with this, because if nobody was going to say this was wrong, guess what?
It still isn't right for the kids.
No.
That's what you gotta do.
This
what's
is not
for
right for the kids.
And you need to stress in tomorrow's meeting, if we are doing any kind of item changes or whatever, policy changes, they need to speak up, cause it's
Yeah.
not gonna, I can't do anything to them. I can't
I know.
do one darn thing to
But
'em.
when we sat down and this has been hours, I don't know how many pieces of paper I've thrown at Mr. Alt.
And if it's not gonna work and it's gonna
I don't
hurt
think
our
it's-
kids, then.
And I'm not trying to say that the non-core things are not important, because again, you know, we've had kids that graduated from here and came to school because they were in band and they performed well in those areas. FFA, you know, that's their thing, and that's what keeps them in school. And we have gotten rid of option A and option B, which I think if you go with the 12 credits for the core classes and 10 for the non-core, you're still rewarding those kids for taking the harder classes, because when it comes down to it, they will have more credits. And as far as the kids, I know it was because kids aren't taking tests serious. And you can attest to this. The top 8 or 9 kids will do extremely well and try. I mean, these are seniors gonna take this test. We take it in, what, February? Below that, the bottom 10 are gonna care less. They're not gonna
They
be
know
in the
they're out
top
of the
8, they
picture
don't
anyway.
care. And I don't believe that that's an issue we have here, in all honesty.
Do the senior scores go into this? Do you
It
get
is
all the
supposed to.
results back from the
Yes,
seniors by
and
the
so,
graduation
we're
time?
talking,
so you can
but
put
we're
them-
talking, you know, March before they have, I mean, it still can
But they do
change,
get
it
them all
does
in
change a
before
little bit,
graduation.
yes. But this is going to be a very time-consuming project, and again, when you're trying to deal with 2 separate GPAs, or rankings, or whatever you wanna call it, a ranking number and a GPA, that's not gonna go over well.
And we talked about this, I think you have to be and communicate with the kids right away what it is. I mean, if it's a ranking number, they need to understand that, and that's what it is, because, and
Well,
whether you meet with the parents too and
Yeah, because
explain
it's
it.
the parents.
because-
How many letters
yeah.
have we gotten? I mean, as board members or phone calls? More than I care to count.
Well,
How
and-
unfair the system is to the kids
And
who
there's
take.
a lot of schools that don't do anything. They don't wait
Sure.
their stuff, this is the way it is, and tough. You know, I had a kid that was looking forward to being valedictorian of her class. They changed the whole system right before, the week before graduation. I didn't send a letter, because you know what? She's off at college, no one has asked her if she was valedictorian, no one cares. However, again, when we get to graduation, and we say, this is your GPA, mine is lower than yours, and you're the valedictorian, I'm not gonna be too happy. And you guys all have had kids go through here. Jump in that situation just for a minute.
Is there, I sat through all the things before too, I guess. First thing was, I took physics and I was option B.
Why were you option B?
That's where it's off put me, because I'm smart. But that's the connotation.
option
It
A.
doesn't work that way. No, I took physics and I was option B the whole time. Because I had to take ag, remember? Because we dumped guts all over your tables and your government or whatever.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
so the idea has always been, what I'm thinking is like along the lines of a college thing. If you want to take a harder college course, but you don't want it to affect your GPA, you can, what do they call that? Survey the course? What do they-
Pass-fail.
Yeah.
Pass fail.
Okay, so instead of providing extra ranking for the kids that do extra hard things, how about providing no ranking for the kids that do extra hard things, and you only look at the classes that everybody does take? You only look at the required courses for GPA. So rather than saying, go out on a limb and take physics, and I hope you do good because it's going to affect your GPA, why don't you just say, please take physics because it's good for you, and you need to be expanding your horizons. But when you compare the kids, since there's no option A, option B anymore, it always amazed me how all the kids knew who was option A and option B anyway. Didn't you just, I mean, this last graduation, I don't think I got the GPA numbers, did I? It was just number 1, number 2, number 3. I had no idea. So that always amazed me that everybody knew who was option A and option B, but that doesn't exist anymore. So if you're taking just the kids, just compare the classes that they all take together. The majority of just look at the required classes instead of penalizing for physics. Or Vicky said, I think in the second meeting, give them a +1 for physics or something. If you make it I think it's becoming way too hard of a calculation.
Well, that's why going with the 12 credits was going to be the easiest route, and those kids would still be rewarded for taking the hard classes. And, you know, I know that we want our kids to do the best, and I have a lot of support here, which I'm very, very grateful for the staff, because they all work very hard at the reading. It's not just, you know, the reading teachers are doing the reading. Every single teacher, Mrs. Wacker, you get scholastic art, and she does reading with those kids. We put in an extra reading class for junior high that now Mrs. Hahn has. And it's, you know, everybody is a part of this, so it's not like the non-core people are not important, because I've used them, you know, in a lot of situations, but MAPS is not to be used as an assessment tool. That's not what it was intended for. And I had students, Tom made up little cards for these kids, and They get their little pep talk before they do it. I said, what is the object of this test? To do better than we did before. And the students know if something wasn't correct. I had a student that said mine dropped 40 points. She actually came to me and said, can I try this again, because I know I can do, it shouldn't have happened. She didn't have an explanation as to why. I don't know if she was having a bad day, I don't know. But they're very aware of the testing. They don't get away from it. And also, you know, I make sure that I too look at what kids are taking and what they're not taking. You know, we sat here with registration with parents on, and I had kids of seniors, then their parents are sitting right there and they're saying, they don't need that class. Well, there isn't a lot we can do about that factor.
So what are we gonna do?
So now this will start with the freshman class next year, whatever we do. This is out the window and they'll start with next year's freshman class.
This right now is in effect.
It's in effect.
Right, this year.
Unless you basically void it out, I don't know.
Can you drop it on the kids that are already on it?
Well, nothing's been added in there because,
I thought it's just starting with this freshman class right now. So there's no kids that are on.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
the others.
Because this went in effect a couple years ago?
No.
Oh, it did.
Just to-
What are we
But I
doing
mean,
right
you
now?
planned it a couple years
Just-
ago.
Yes.
well, I just
Right,
started
that's
toying
just
with the
GPA.
numbers, yeah, straight
Just
GPA.
straight GPA, and that's gonna be until whenever this kicks in.
Mhm.
Mrs. Novicki, are the NISA test percentage, are they the same all the way across the board?
Yes, the maximum you can get is 200, but again, those are, you know, these are things that weren't supposed to be used as instruments to measure students' GPAs. Those were to test the ability and the knowledge that the students had, and for accountability for the school.
So if we want to do this, we need to come up with a ranking of classes, which one's more important than others.
No,
and so
that's
on.
what I think we need to, you have to watch it. That's why I'm saying if we just do all core subjects and give them 12 credits, non-core get 10. They might push some of those kids into, well, I want to, because they will figure it out, especially if it's tight. And usually your top, there's not a huge gap between the top 5 or 6 kids. They will figure it out that if I don't take physics and this person does, regardless of basically getting an A or a B, they're gonna get more points for that class. As opposed to trying to take, and I'm not even gonna say anything because then it'll sound like they're not important, but.
So by getting more credits, you improve your GPA no matter how you score in that class?
Well, you won't get an F, I mean, you can't get an F or a D, but normally if you're gonna take physics, you're probably a fairly, I
But
mean.
by getting more credits for taking that class, it will give you a higher GPA.
So when the kids wanna take a study hall or be a student aide, I always explain to them, you understand when this figures into your GPA, you'll have less credits, which means it could drop you in ranking.
So why don't you develop this and bring it to us? Do you have it done already?
Well, these are all my notes that
She
I
has
needed
nothing
to remind.
developed.
Well, I mean, that was kind of what the plan that we had kind of devised,
Well,
we just said,
we had the committee and you guys,
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
when the whole, just talking personally, from when the whole thing started, Dylan was still in school. And quite honestly, it was the non-core class that kept him out of the top 4 or 5.
And you
Small
know,
engines with
in
Michael
defense
was
of
his
that,
lowest score.
I would be in the same boat. You give me a physics class, I can sit there and I can study, and there's a book, you put me in the shop,
Exactly.
I
That's
could
where he
do
was
terrible. I mean, I'm not saying that those classes are easy and that it depends on who you are.
Yes.
But we do have some very intelligent kids that are sitting in every ag class that they can, and I could not convince them to take the harder classes, and their parents were sitting there and said, no, they don't need it.
But if that's what they want to do with their life, why shouldn't they get the most of that they can?
Agreed,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you know,
Your
I
job
can
is to
encourage
encourage
it,
them
and
to
and
take
I
the
try.
harder class.
And,
And
you know,
that's-
there was another student on the opposite side of that is signing up for some very hard classes that probably shouldn't be in there.
It's a liberal arts education, you want to get as much, kids don't know what they're gonna go into.
No,
Right.
no.
You need to have as much background as you can, that's the whole idea.
If I were to go to school to be a band teacher, and
You did!
I did. But I also took all of the advanced math and science classes, not because of class ranking, because honestly, I wanted to be a chiropractor before I graduated. Anyways, kids are having a hard enough time right now, their schedule fitting in band and vocal. I'm teaching a class at 7:30 a.m. Wednesday mornings to get those kids. I have 8 kids in there. They can't get it in, but they want to do band. And they can't compete unless they're in my class. They're having a hard enough time doing that, let alone thinking, okay, I want to be in the top 4, so I have to drop band, even though I want to teach band, and go take chemistry, because that has to be in my point system. Now, I'm not bashing chemistry, because I also took it, but I never did drop a music class to go and do that. That's what I wanted to do.
And that's going to be one of the advantages, I think, of going to the 8-period day, where
Sure.
we only have 4 time slots in there.
Until
it becomes
physics
very
is up
difficult.
against band and vocal, and then
Until what?
physics is up against band and vocal.
That's easier to do than you think. With 8 time slots as opposed to 4 in a day?
Sure. But I have, right now, I mean, I've got 30 kids in band. A lot of them are option A smart kids, and they work their tail off to get their scheduling worked out, and it's going to be even harder if they're also thinking about this point system too. I mean, you're not saying it and you're doing, I mean, I know you don't mean it, but you're making the fine arts less important that way.
But I think there again, that's why we want to go to 8-period day, so that there is more time for the fine arts, because that has been a huge problem, not having enough time for the arts programs. Whereas I think in an 8-period day, you're going to find that time, because you're going to have.
That's a different issue from what.
Right.
But
This is
I'm
a-
not
But it's-
saying that it's less important.
Sure.
This is
I-
at most
I know
3
you're not.
kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
This
this,
is
I.
the most
Would it-
3 kids.
Would it be
Right.
possible to do this is a little out on a
Why
limb
didn't we
here.
get this in the first place? What was the
Because we got so many letters. I think I've still got the letters at home from parents objecting to their kid did not be in the top 5 because there was a Class B option student who took easier classes, there you go, and was ranked ahead.
Easier for them,
Yeah.
but maybe not easier for an A student that can't use a table saw.
Exactly. But that's.
I mean, that's, I
Could you-
don't know
Yeah.
how you can justify any of that.
I'm just saying that right now we're putting all the emphasis on core anyway, so it doesn't, I mean, this is core. If you look at it, this is all the core classes anyway, so we're already putting all that emphasis on there. So,
So do we bring it, I
Could you-
guess, my question is then, I mean, do we bring it back to a committee and get these teachers to say, hey, this sucks, and fess up to it, and before the next board meeting, and do something different? Because if we're gonna have a policy, I've always said, if the policy doesn't work, let's change it. So,
well, and I
and
will
if they're not
tell
gonna
you
speak
that,
up, this will be their time,
Are
otherwise.
the teachers still here that were on that committee?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I don't know if all, I don't know.
well, not all of them,
So do you think that there's any way we can change this, that everybody's gonna be happy in the long run?
No.
Do I think it, no, no.
Is it
No,
gonna
but
be?
if
We're
it's, you know,
kinda
but if it's gonna
starting.
make
Randy?
it a problem for grade
Yes.
point averages for
We're
the
kinda
kids to
starting.
go on to college, then we.
That was his suggestion.
Right, but I'm just saying, no matter what we implement, is it gonna make everybody happy?
No.
Could you?
You know,
No.
we got people mad now, but we're gonna have people mad no matter what we do.
Well, and I just know that when they take out those things and we compare them,
Yeah.
you know, we talked
Enjoy
about,
this
what do
position.
we call this, a ranking number at the end, and so it doesn't look like a percent. Parents will figure it out quickly, and they will be back here. And I don't know how many of us will still be sitting here at the table.
But don't some schools, like, say you want to take art 4 years? So you take it for 2 and you get extra credit than if you take the 3rd and the 4th year. You get more credits for,
That's a possibility.
Doing something
And
like
we
that.
actually changed art so that it doesn't say,
well, I just picked art because
Art.
she's sitting right there.
well, we did, we just changed it this year, so, because I told her, I said, well, they can't, the system that we have, if it just says art, and they've already signed up for it, they get 0 credits for it. So,
It used to say intro and advanced, and now it says art 1, art 2, art 3, art 4.
So what you're saying,
Which is
if
what
they're
it should
devoted
say
to it
anyway.
for 4
Yeah,
years,
and
that's
they
what
get-
they
yes,
wanna
they
do,
are
they
giving
should
you more
accept somebody that
classes
just
then.
wants to be
But
interested in
it's,
something.
yeah. It's like comparing, it isn't
So
even comparing
could not
apples and
grade
oranges,
board
it's
be worth
comparing a
more points?
marshmallow with an orange.
You know what I mean?
I'm just saying that this is a lot more difficult, I think, than what its intended purpose was to be. And again, this isn't their GPA, this is about who's going to talk at graduation and who's going to get a medal. And just give them all a medal, I don't care.
Green ribbons.
I mean,
Just have to have equipment out there for you.
Participate.
It's just like a participation board.
Participation.
That's
I
exactly
mean,
what it is.
you know, again,
Thanks for
and I
trying
know
high
it's
school.
an
See
important
ya.
thing in a kid's life,
You
but
get honorable mention.
you know what, they leave
That's
here
it.
and they go on and they do whatever it is they do in their life, and they don't look back and say, my life is over because I wasn't valedictorian of the class, were you?
That's what these parents that were calling all these people are mad about, because they didn't think this was fair the way it was before, and that's why they wanted to.
This isn't
Something
really,
changed, but I'm
and this
not
is my
sure
own
if this did
opinion,
what
I
we
don't
wanted.
think this is fair to kids either, because we're assessing them on maps, which is not supposed to be an assessment purpose. You're not supposed to
I
rank
agree,
kids,
that would-
you're not supposed to give them
Yeah,
grades.
right.
I think the goal was to make the kids accountable
Correct.
and want to do well on
And
the
I
test
agree.
instead of,
And that was
I
a
do-
big part of it. I
Yes.
wasn't on the committee, but I know that was part of it.
I do think as far as testing, accountability has improved, because those kids come back, they have that little card and they know if they've improved or they haven't improved. And I think they've heard enough about testing that they know, I mean, some of them, not everybody, but
Sure.
some of them that really want to do well and that are going to go on to school are trying harder on the test and trying to do
That's
what
good.
they possibly
And
can do.
Overall
Yeah.
morale and character has gone up.
No.
what now?
Overall morale and character has gone up, that things are just different than they were.
And one gentleman that was standing in the office going through this with us, I actually said, and, okay, let's pick on you, for example, you're a graduate of here, and, you know, what did you do your last year? Wrong example. I took yearbook, I took band, I took study hall, what was the other one?
Journalism. It's journalism.
Hey, that's
Journalism.
hard,
Yeah.
okay?
And then he took one core class. Well, needless to say, this young man went on to run a business, a whole floor of Cargill, and is now employed by our district and has done well. And he said, my intent was to work my butt off for 7 semesters, so I didn't have to work as hard my 8th semester. Well, how do you argue that point when he went on to get 3rd in the class or whatever, and I only know that because he told me, because I don't remember who got what. I couldn't tell you who valedictorian was 3 years ago at the school I was at, I don't know. So, I think it's just kind of a matter of us making the testing important to the kids. And the seniors already take the ACT, they take the Compass test. I think, and actually MAPS testing doesn't even have a norm for seniors. It stops at the 11th grade. I don't know if you know that or not.
Yes, but I think that was part of the deal, was that then there wouldn't be that time crunch.
Okay. So tell me what I'm supposed to do. I just needed you to hear my thoughts on this because Mr. All was getting sick of me throwing paper.
My thoughts on it were, and I thought Mr. Novicki needed an opportunity to expound on it, but I think the committee, and at the time, I think Vicki, you said it, this was arrived at because what we were doing was not working at that time. I think that was agreement. Now, whether this is the right thing or not, I don't know. I don't know what the right thing is, but what we were doing at that time was not working. And I think this was looked at as an alternative for that, to keep the kids focused more and to try to come up with something. And I disagree a little bit on the part with the MAPS and the NISA test, because it's only 15% of the total picture. They still 85% of it is still on their GPA, I believe, which takes in all of the classes. So I think that part of it, you're still allowing some emphasis on that. But again, is it the right thing? I don't know. Somebody said before, there probably is not a right thing.
There's not a right answer. I mean, there just isn't. This is a tough one that, what did we say? We're replacing one unfair system then with another unfair system, and we'll probably replace this with another, you know, I don't know.
It goes back to tax policy to the start of this tonight. I mean, you think you're gonna create winners and losers, and it's, yeah, you will. I mean,
It just might not be the right ones.
yeah.
But we're gonna try, I guess the biggest
Exactly.
one was MAPS is not supposed to be used for that, and we wanted to stay away from separating core and non-core, but we didn't do that with this, because this is core. This is all core subjects. It's being tested again.
What concerns me is back to the whole, I mean, your whole process, that you would hope that you are actually graduating, you know, most intelligent. And I guess there's two things. Obviously, as our class size has dropped, being valedictorian of 19 kids versus
Yeah.
60.
1,500.
Yeah, 1,500 or 59.
That was Ms. Earl's point.
You know, it's like, well, so
One of 26 or
Yeah.
4 of 26,
You
you
know.
know. I mean, and they do have to, and that's the other thing, if they wanna be, the smaller the class, the harder they're gonna have to work to maintain the GPA, because some of those scholarships only go to the top 25% of the kids.
And then to further that, you know, all the testing that we're asked to do, we still don't reflect, because somebody mentioned how well somebody's done in college. There's no reflection about us as a school district, of how those kids perform at the second level and come back. I mean, that should be more of than what our maps or what our NEIS or what those scores are. It should be
We've
what they.
had some kids that have scored high on the ACT and didn't make it through college. We've had kids that
Yeah.
didn't, you know, did your average, you know, or below average, did a 19 and have come back and.
But it's
done
gotta be about what
extremely well.
happens in high school. It can't be about what happens.
Correct.
Out of
And
that
and
4 years,
personally,
it's gotta be about what
I-
happens right here.
I just,
And whether whether valedictorian is important to us or not, it's important to the kids.
Absolutely.
Your daughter will attest to that, because.
Well, and if it's-
and it was at that time.
Yeah.
And now.
And you asked
If
her.
it's not
probably
important,
not.
why have it? Just get rid
Well,
of it.
some schools have gotten rid of that, honest to God, they've gotten rid of
Really?
that honor and just said,
But it is important, I mean, the kids, for some reason. have
okay,
that.
so tell me what I'm supposed to be doing.
I know what I would do, but I would take it back to committee
Okay.
and hash it over, but that's just my opinion. If they
No,
don't
that's
speak
what,
up-
that's what I mean, the committee was set up, it was discussed, you guys, I don't know how many meetings you set up on it, several.
Several.
It seemed like 2 years we worked on it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was brought several times. So, this is what we're looking at, this is what we're looking
We're
at.
not far
Yeah, I
ahead
don't
of
get
anything
why
yet that
now
we
all of
can't
a
make
sudden-
I
changes.
know, I thought it was passed over.
Because it's just like about with anything, it seems like, it's like not until it's implemented and we're gonna use it is people speaking up. It's too late. It's like, you know, so.
But yet, we're looking at the kids.
Right, it is, and that's why I said, let's bring it back to committee, I'm willing to do that, so.
So how many
The biggest issue
teachers
is that
were
we
on
just
this
couldn't
committee?
calculate it.
What?
Was there
Couldn't
more
calculate
teachers
it.
on the committee?
Was the biggest issue.
Was it-
Well, we figured out finally how to calculate it.
5, 6?
Oh, good.
4 or 5 teachers?
So it's a pretty good size.
I think, but I don't know that it needs to be that big, does it? I mean, when you start.
So far, I don't think it makes any difference.
If out of 5 teachers, nobody can say, hey, yeah, this is a bad idea, well, you know. But,
And, you
But
know,
then
okay.
Anybody that's still here that was on the committee should still be on.
right, absolutely. I mean, I know I was on the
I don't know
committee.
who was even on
Okay.
I'll take whatever the committee recommends.
Chickens lay out.
Hey.
That worked out well last time.
Yeah.
Oh. I think it was
Vicky and I was on, I don't know who the other one was. I don't remember, I just know I was.
If Bob would go on, he's, you know, I don't have any, I don't wanna be on it.
And then you know a lot more about scores and classes and all that.
Okay,
But I was never asked.
yeah.
Well, and, you know, I don't know what the answer is, because it's like Vicki said, you're gonna get calls regardless of what happens, but, you know, there's a lot of schools that just don't do anything. They
You're
don't
gonna
weigh
get-
classes, it's just whatever you take, and that's what you do.
I did a lot of research on it, and no school does it the same way twice. I mean,
No.
some do, some take percentage, they'll take 25% of the NESA test scores. Some schools do that. Some schools rank, like you, they give you extra points. I found no 2 schools that did it the same.
It's tough.
Okay, well, I need a motion, oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying, then the next thing that should be in there is the kids that are in activities should get points, because that's proven fact.
Yes, but-
That if they're in activities,
Yeah.
they're doing better.
There
Some
was one
schools
school
do
who did
that
that.
too,
There was
yeah.
one school I found did that.
They also give PE credits to kids that are out for athletics.
I mean, it's,
Can't do that.
I don't know.
I disagree with that one totally. I don't think you can do that legally.
Well, you can go out for one sport, you learn about one sport.
When I was in high school, if you were in a sport, you didn't have to go to PE.
Okay, then I'll need a motion to make a committee on this class ranking system.
Really? Can you just name one?
Yeah, Yeah.
Just name it. You don't need a motion.
Well, okay, then we have to do something with this, discuss and act on
We don't have to act on it.
Okay, then we'll just,
Table it.
Board
Table it.
suggested this issue go back to the committee for more study.
okay, there you go.
Good
It's
job,
done.
Angie.
You're gonna be short members though.
Hurts again.
You're gonna need new members, or some new members, because some are not here. So find a couple new teachers. I mean, all the board members are the same, aren't they? There's Vicky and.
Well, I think Bob's gonna have Vicki and I, so.
Yeah. So you gotta find teachers, because.
There's some here.
At
They
least
won't
one
be
of them's
hard.
gone.
I have plenty.
The president will decide that.
Yeah.
Principal,
Yeah.
They'll get it figured
Well,
out.
yeah.
Okay, we'll discuss this later. Okay, reports, activities report.
Corey's supposed to go, but he left me a couple of
Oh,
things,
okay.
but isn't he next?
Yeah.
Yeah, he left me, and then it just said kind of go through here. He's, not sure, something.
Wait, some tonight.
So, he's got the numbers, and actually, the room off of the weight room, the window has been installed, so we can actually see inside there. And, otherwise, the calendar is full. We would have nothing but a full calendar.
Okay, principals report. Anything else?
I'm gonna go fast because my head hurts. Statewide assessment results have been released. They are embargoed. So what did we say, the September 27th or something like that? The rankings are in there. That was, Brooke has emailed me, but you don't
It's
have
on the
access to
27th
them.
now?
Yeah.
Is the day.
They're out, but they usually let us look through them first.
Yeah.
Um,
27th's Friday.
So, I was actually very pleased with how we looked on paper. ACT scores were released, and our average was a 22.7, and the state's was a 21.5.
What was ours?
22.7. So,
Is that kind of where we, I mean, does that go up and down quite a bit, or is it stay pretty much?
It depends on the class.
Sure, I understand that, but I mean,
21.
not looking at one class, but look at every 2 or 3
The year
years.
before was 22.5, but then the year before that was like a 19.7 or something.
That's a pretty good average score,
22.7, we'll take it.
That's very good.
Yes. Which goes along with the John Baylor, Jerry has put together that schedule for ACT prep. We also have, him working with the junior high kids. John Baylor has kind of put together a junior high section already in 8th grade to start these kids thinking about the process. Because what they don't know is that colleges take your grades from your 9th grade year, your 10th grade year, and your 11th grade year, and your first semester of your senior year, and that's pretty much it. I mean, the focus is on the first 3 years of school anyway, so, they need to start right away, and that was kind of an emphasis I made to the freshmen when we started, that your grades are gonna matter a lot as freshmen. So, anyway, new elementary, huh?
We do it in the Maynard some of the time.
He's rotating it this year. We're gonna start working it so that, I put in a few stipulations that homework has to be done. If we're going to invest, $1,700 in this program, I don't think anybody's checked homework and made the kids kind of accountable. So I think it's time, some of them use it to get out of class. And so I think then we're going to rotate it so that some of those are gonna have to come in at night after practice so that it's an emphasis put on the kids and how important it is to them. So, and then we now give the quizzes that go with it, but they have to have the homework done. Because there is homework
I
with it.
just don't like taking kids out of class
I know.
for that. Okay.
This is a voluntary thing that
If
they
it's so
can.
important, we're spending money on, why don't we do it after, do it in the mornings or something, have the kids come in the mornings?
Well, because you heard we have independent band and we have independent chorus and,
It's hot, they have football practice and volleyball practice.
well, but
Well,
at night,
find the
we've done
time
it at
that's-
night before. and
Is that
it's-
important?
Yes, and we are working on
Take
that.
class time out of.
We are.
To do this.
And so that's kind of why we said the homework must be done. Any kid that doesn't have that, he has to check their homework and make sure that it is finished. If not, they're out and they go back to class. Because right now, they don't have any accountability. They just sit here and show up and they feel like paying, you don't know if they're paying attention or not paying attention.
I don't know if it's worth spending $1,700 on it. I watched it for a while, and it was boring. seen it?
I love John Baylor.
Oh, I thought it was boring. I tried to watch it for a while to see what the kids were getting. It was.
He talks really fast. Isn't he like great?
He thinks he's funny and he's not funny.
Not the first comment I've heard that they got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think he does a pretty
The
good
kids
job.
are all playing, cat over here.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why the homework needs to be finished.
That's a voluntary
It
thing.
wasn't
Yes.
worthwhile from one of my viewpoints, so. Whatever.
Okay, well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. Okay, all right. The new elementary teachers attended DIVLS training on September 5th. We are finished, and now we are working on our intervention schedule, and that's where the 30 minutes of the extra reading time comes in, that language arts time. So, it's our next process in the reading series. The reading series, I've watched several of the classes. It's taken them a little bit of time to get it up and running, but they're getting there. And it's divided into whole group, small group, and then they have their language arts time and their intervention time all in the day. The reading in the small groups are 90 minutes and the other part is 30 minutes. We talked to David City because I had some that had concerns actually today because they're not having a lot of time to get to small groups, and they said give yourself some time. It took us probably 2.5 months to get to that point so that they're familiar with what they're doing. So they will get it. They're working very hard at it. Math testing starts the 23rd of September, and on the 27th we have the ESU coming to do data analysis. Yay! Okay, John Baylor. We love John Baylor. You ever met him? You should meet him. He's a fun guy. The school year, I'm sure most of you have heard, it did not start off like we wanted it to. We had lots of computer issues. My computer didn't want to work. I lost the elementary schedule. I lost the pair schedule, student handbooks, and other things. Crashed several times.
So is it on the webpage now, those handbooks?
Yeah, that was all done before that. Thank goodness I had emailed it to Jan and she had a copy of it. And so Tom got me a brand new one, and then about the time he figured out that my computer wasn't working, the server crashed. So we're okay. The other thing too, I know that there's a vicious rumor going around town, and I just wanted to clarify that one because a teacher was approached in the post office. No, the students are not staying in the old building. No, they have not been banned from having water in the school. In fact, I think some of them went and got styrofoam cups, they put their name on it, and they're traipsing to the water fountain. So that story is not true. Whoever started that one is, and so I just wanted to make sure you knew that, no, Mr. Alt did not make them stay on that side of the building.
You've been sneaking down, or they've been sneaking?
They've been sneaking down. So life is good now. We're on a roll and we're good. Play production underway.
Tryouts.
Swing choir, they were done. She announced on Friday who has gotten them. She's doing a fabulous job. Scrimmages were held for all the fall sports. That went well. The tree joined the boosters, and our calendar is full with lots of activities.
How'd grandparents' day go?
Very well. I'll comment.
Okay.
I attended it, and it was very good. It was, I think I heard a lot of positive comments. They liked it, that it was in, not at the end of the year, and they did a fantastic job, I thought. There's a good crowd there.
Way more, well, I had kind of put the numbers in my head knowing who was here, and then we actually had to go get chairs because it was packed. Which, September is, Grandparents' Day was September 8th, so I'm not sure. I think if you're gonna honor somebody, it's kind of like your birthday. Put it on the day when it's supposed to be, or as close to it as you can get. And the music thing came from my music instructors last year. They are still practicing for the spring concert, and here they're trying to shuffle kids back and forth, and we had a group that was late getting back over there last year because they were still rehearsing. So I think it's just better that we put it now and we're not trying to cram it in. And they got to go visit the classrooms and did all of those fun things. So
That right through the high school, that was just grade school, or?
yeah. Our next adventure though might be to invite parents to come in for lunch, go by classes and invite parents to come in for lunch if they want to. And we may, depending on talking to the cooks, go half and half. So that might be our next adventure. And if you do see the new teachers, and that includes throwing Blake in the mix and Mr. Janata and Mr. Earhart. Is that all I have left?
From last year.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are doing a magnificent job. And honestly say they were all pretty good hires. I mean, not about the teachers.
Who missed that comment over
Wait,
here?
what?
Oh, I went. They were good hires. And he laughed. Okay, I'm finished. Oh, wait, no, I'm not. Junior high football won. 62-12. Woo!
I just have a couple things. I just want to thank all the staff. I know at the beginning of the year it was tough. I know teachers had to step up and do some things that they're not used to doing, and so that, it's good to see. I mean, I always say that we have a great staff here. I have an opportunity to meet most of the new teachers. They're real excited. I've heard great positive things about their classrooms from students, and it's always good to hear from students that it's good and not, well, I don't like her or whatever. And so that's good, and continue with that. The other thing I just want to ask, and I'm not really for sure, someone brought it to my attention, this free admission pass policy. It says all regular employees and families, with the exception of substitutes, blah, 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 it goes on. So what do we consider families?
We just do, I don't think it's the.
If they
children.
graduated, they're not
Yeah.
included in that anymore. Once they have graduated, they are done.
Okay.
So it's parents.
It's parents and students here in school already.
Or younger than that.
Okay. I just was,
I think, well,
so, okay, well, all right.
yeah, because if they've graduated, they're kind of not in the system anymore, and it's,
And then when do you cut it off, their age, or when they graduate college, or when do you?
Well, I just went to the Nebraska reference thing, and it even goes on, it just says, they allow their retired employees in,
the new conference pretty much gives a pass to everyone anyway.
passing his or her spouse to recognize school activities. So in the state statute, it's just his or her spouse. But, I mean, families to me is, I mean, if your kid's in college and they come back to a ball game and watch their younger kid, to me, that's family. If they're living under your roof and you're responsible for them, it's family. That's just my opinion. So I didn't know where it stood, but now I do, so. That's all.
Because then you have to figure out who's in college, who's not in college.
Well, I know,
Now, what
that's.
about a kid that's the same age, that's working, takes a semester off, now he can't?
Well, if they're not living under their roof, then,
Well, they
but,
might still.
I mean, okay, that's fine, I don't have a problem with it, just so it's, I know that now it's anybody that's in high school, okay. All right, it's the only thing I have.
My turn. Thank you from the PPEA for the donuts and for the support of the school board, and pass that around. Also, we have activity passes for the conference for Lewis and Clark, so I'll pass these around and grab your pass out of there. And again, I think these are good for you and your spouse. Get in on the same ticket. Our preschool program got a letter in the mail that has been approved by the state. Again, it's been approved every year, but this year it's after we've had 3 years. We would now qualify for get our enrollment of our preschool students in our qualify our school enrollment for state aid purposes if we got any state aid. I think we talked a little while ago about the cooler and the air conditioner and the music room. We did purchase a small air conditioning unit, portable air conditioning unit. It's better than what we had.
Did we ever take it up to a junior high classroom, junior high building and see? No.
No, we haven't yet. It's hooked, vented to a window.
I see.
So we haven't moved it around yet. para position, Liz Kamari is currently doing that. Molly Burns, we had hired her, and I think with some issues with family and just so many things going on, she was only here for a week, I think, and then decided it wasn't going to work out, so we did offer the position to Liz. I think that's working out okay. Feasibility study, signed that contract, sent it in. I had contacted Mr. Ham over in Osmond, and they are going to participate. Also, Broomfield and Wausau are going to be taking part. They had talked to Creighton, I think, at one time, and decided that, maybe it'd be a good time to put, gather some information. Tomorrow, Gary Ehlers, who was doing the study, is going to be going to each one of the districts and talk to superintendents. And then tomorrow evening, we're going to meet in my office here, and the superintendents, and I think he's just going to go through some things with us. So I'll try and keep you posted as well as I can on what's happening with that. He sent out a sheet with a list of information he's going to want. So we're putting that together. I think I mentioned during the budget presentation we just received today our notification of $877. Kitchen of the cook position, Lisa Ziegenbein is going to be having surgery on her, I don't know, carpal tunnel, whatever. So they're trying to find a person to come in and substitute for her. The kitchen, we did try the hot water heater thing and that to get that water temperature up on that with that booster and that. It did not quite reach it. We have ordered a new one. It should be, I think, Wednesday, possibly.
New dishwasher, or new?
We'll be ordering a new booster as
New
well.
booster, okay.
What we've ordered.
Are they gonna install that?
They're gonna install it.
Perfect.
And then they'll have, I think they're gonna have an electrician and plumber here. Because they can't do some of that. They can't technically do the plumbing, so it's commercial plumbing, but they'll be here to make sure it's hooked up, that the booster's hooked up correctly. I sent you a letter on Bakowitz. I haven't heard any more about it. I don't really know any more about it. I'm guessing it's somebody, I don't know if I remember what that was about anymore. He wanted information on, what did he want information on?
Patronat,
Oh.
Americanism.
Yeah. How we met,
The
minutes.
committee,
and-
the Americanism Committee is what it was. I have no idea what he's really wanting.
Well, if you're on the
to do
committee, come up the 17th,
with that.
because that's Constitution Day.
That'd be gone.
And we'll have the AYP and the NEPAS reports to you hopefully next month on that, since there's still some embargo down on that, I think, so.
Yeah, and then November is when they add the graduation cohort to it. So why we have to keep it under wraps.
Think-
What times for them?
150. Mr. Schumacher will be, I think, lower elementary, because he only has 9 or 10. So he's just gonna do K through 3. Which might really count that as a new team.
Okay, that's everything. I think I have.
Have we gotten any complaints about, the bus drivers complaining about the intersections not being cleared, like some farmers?
Bob hasn't said anything.
Hasn't
He's
even
got
just-
the corn.
Yeah, the corn being out to the road. It's just out this
That's always an
weekend.
issue this time of the year.
And I didn't know, we used to put in deal, make sure farmers, is it a state deal, they're supposed to, so many feet away?
Well, it's a county deal where you gotta be so many feet off the
Oh, I
road,
know
but they
there's
don't
some
enforce
From
it.
there to there.
There was something in the paper.
Especially at intersections, it needs to be.
Yeah, we've come across some intersections, it's like, gal, if a kid come flying through there and there's a
Well,
bus.
if the deer came out, you got no time to
Yeah,
react.
yeah, they're really bad.
You gotta be really careful.
Yeah.
They did.
Contact.
Did they do it?
Yeah, they did.
Contact the counties.
Yeah, it should go through the county, it's their
So with
responsibility.
that tax increase, they're gonna really.
What do you mean?
Forget it.
How about, is a new van, a new bus in?
Yes.
I saw Bob driving the van
Yes, they're
downtown.
both been delivered. We delivered last week.
And
Haven't got them licensed yet,
Are they gonna drive the van back and forth? Is that?
That will go to Norfolk to be used for that.
Okay, so now we're at.
Any other comments?
The new
Are
van
we
is
ne-
nice, by the
Are
way.
we negotiated for this year, or do we gotta start that next month?
Negotiations were done for this, started for next year, and I need to look at that timeline on that. I think we've done the first part, say by September 1, you had to begin negotiations, and we did that. I think when the two-year agreement was done, we recognized the association. We have done that, I think the board responded, but we do need to get started.
In October, that recognition. Okay.
Yeah, I was
Make a note
recognized
here.
earlier.
Yeah, I know. I don't wanna
That
miss
takes
the
care of
first year
September,
out.
yeah. Any other comments or questions?
The bright new van is pretty, the red one. Got to take Bob on a trip.
That yellow bus is pretty.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
Is there any
Thanks,
signs or
everyone.
anything that go on
You don't have to do that anymore.
there? Probably your school.
Oh, we could get the Plainview Pirates put on there, but no, that's what you did.
No, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
See you in
Okay,
October.
thank you, everyone.